Thanks for joining us for our final workshop of the VECAN conference. For those who don't know me, I'm Becca Custer. I'm the AmeriCorps member at Vermont Natural Resources Council, and we help to coordinate VECAN, and I help to organize this year's conference. So this session today is called Tips, Tools, and Strategies for an Effective Energy Committee. So a quick agenda for the day. I'm just going to briefly walk through some of the resources for energy committees on the VECAN website. And then we're going to spend about 30 minutes or so in breakout rooms around 4 different topics. And then we'll come back together for the full group for a debrief and reflection on those conversations. And then we'll let you have the rest of your day. So first, I'm going to do a little bit of a walkthrough of our website. So I'm going to share my screen. Just 1 second. Okay, can people see?
Yes, all good. We can see.
You can also see all the other tabs I have open. Don't pay attention to those. The most important is the website. So many of you are probably familiar with our website and the resources that it has on it, but I definitely wanted to just mention some key resources that we have and also some that we recently added. One that I wasn't planning on talking about, but now it's right here, is the kind of banner page. And I will say this is updated relatively frequently, and there's a lot of either upcoming events like our conference or some resources that I think are constantly important that are easy to find here. So definitely check out our banner page. But I'm gonna first start off with something that we recently added, which is your VECAN support team. We have incredible partners who help to support VECAN, 2 of which are helping lead this workshop today, Sarah Brock from Vital Communities, who does great work in the Upper Valley, and then John Copans from the Council on Rural Development. And of course, our partners at Energy Action Network and Efficiency Vermont. I saw Brad on the call earlier. Thanks for being here, Brad. So we are here to support you. This is all, here we've laid out kind of all the work that our partners do and how they can help support your work. So definitely use this as a resource. We're here to support you, and you can find this underneath the About page. Now moving forward to the kind of Vermont Energy Committees tab, one thing, speaking of maps and labeling where we all are, we have a map of all the energy committees, which I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with. Normally it loads, not load. Oh, here we go. And this is a great resource, especially if you're interested in like collaborating with surrounding towns. You can see all the different committees in your area and with their contact information. So you can either, click on a committee. We can see Stowe here, for instance. You can access it that way by clicking on one of those pins, or you can up here, you can search one. You could do like Richmond, for example. You can find a committee there with their contact information. And some have websites, and that's also a great way to figure out what other committees are up to. And the last way you can look is just, we have a whole list of them, and you can just scroll down and click on any of them. It's also just like awesome to see in this map just how many energy committees there are and where people and where they are around you. So definitely use it as a resource. I will say though, that I rely on people to let me know when their information has changed. So some of these may be outdated, but if you like happen to want to contact someone and you don't get a response and you think that we have the wrong information, please let me know, and I will make sure to update it.
Becca, there's a question in the chat. How does our brand new committee get added to this map?
Yes, one way you can do that is reaching out directly to me or anyone on the VECAN team, but I'm the one who runs the website, so reach out to me and let me know. That's awesome. We love adding new committees. I've done that recently. And the other way is I'm going to be more regularly sending out surveys to energy committees, asking them for updated contact information to prompt you. And to anybody, if you're subscribed to our email list, I will send an email out asking for people who have recently started a committee to give us their information. But yes, definitely the best way probably is just to reach out to me. I can put my email in the chat at some point as well, too. Is there any other questions? I haven't been monitoring the chat. Okay. Moving on, I'm going to go a little bit more into this section here. So getting started. One of the kind of key resources that we have is our Town Energy and Climate Action Guide, not only about with resources to help you start a committee, but also strengthen and maintain your energy committee, and be on the lookout for an updated version coming hopefully January, February of 2022. There's a lot of resources here that I recommend you check out, but another one that I want to bring attention to is the Strategic Energy Action Toolkit from the Local Energy Solutions, which is based in New Hampshire. I'm going to let Sarah briefly introduce and talk about this resource a bit because it's a really great one.
Sure, go ahead and click on it. Visuals are always helpful. if it takes us to the right link, which it may not. So I won't spend long on this, but we have a sister network in New Hampshire that I work with as well. And they developed this back in 2015. And it's something that I use with energy committees with some frequency. It's really easy to explore on your own. This is meant to be really bare basics planning and project management for volunteer energy committees, just enough planning and thinking ahead so that you actually get more done rather than getting bogged down in the planning process and never getting anything done. Some of what I have had energy committees like most about the tools here are using the scorecard. If you scroll down a little bit, Becca, they'll see what I mean by that. There's an example scorecard, and what, recently I did this with an energy committee in Cornish, New Hampshire, but for a committee that has got a lot of ideas and is not really sure how to focus in and just pick a couple to run with and make some progress on, articulating what those ideas are and running them through a scorecard where you've listed the things that are most important to you, and everybody scores them, and it kind of ranks things for you, and then you can come up with a pretty clearly defined action plan of, we're going to start here and we're going to save that for later. It can, in the couple of energy committee meetings, take you from, oh my gosh, we're spinning our wheels, to we are finally making forward progress. So I've seen a lot of committees use this tool in that way, but there's guides and sort of suggestions here for having strategic plan, mission visioning conversations as new committees or as reestablishing committees, how to come up with like brainstorms of where your efforts are most needed in your town by sort of mapping that out by sector and energy type. And if you have any questions about how to use this, myself or John or Becca in particular would be happy to chat on the phone with you and even attend an energy committee meeting and help you get started.
Sarah. And that seems really relevant to the next section I was going to talk about. And the toolkit is also listed in this area as setting priorities, specifically, identifying projects and campaigns that you want to do and then how to successfully do them. So some things we've listed here are some example, projects to start doing, and then project management and volunteer management techniques and strategies. But another one I want to bring your attention to is the Vermont Community Leadership Network, which is a lot of resources about how to effectively lead and get projects done in your community that the Vermont VCRD put together. And they have a community leadership guide, which is really helpful. And then workshop recordings. A lot of these are skill training recordings or skills training workshops that are really, really helpful. So I recommend you check that out. I don't know, John, if you want to say anything more about it since you helped lead that, but
I think you covered it great. Just like a workshop on DEI practices for local committees, a workshop on communications, or there's a lot in that library. And feel free, that community leadership guide is both electronic as a PDF, but we also have a few copies left that you can request for free on that website. So if you want a mailed copy of that leadership guide, it's available. So thanks, Becca.
Yeah, I went to one of these and it was on hosting like effective meetings in a COVID world. And that was really helpful, especially when we were all kind of starting to host meetings on Zoom and didn't really know what that was about. So and then the strategic energy action toolkit again in this area. Moving on a bit from that, I'm just going to go to resources. You can see there are a lot of resources here and it can be a bit overwhelming, but I want to draw your attention to kind of the top 6, which are really resources by issue area. So in each of these sections we have, I'll click on transportation for an example. So we have a little bit of an overview, some relevant publications. In some sections we have a few ideas of projects. This one's around EVs, and then the initiatives and programs around that topic. For example, the traveling e-bike lending library, which a lot of energy committees have been doing through Locomotion. And then at the bottom of all of these, we have resources, so relevant organizations, and then also just different resources. So Vital Communities has a great town transportation toolkit, which has strategies for approaching transportation projects, a list of possible projects your committee could do, and then how to implement these projects. So another great resource, and that's also listed up. I'm going so far, sorry, I'm trying not to scroll too much, but up here. And so that's what each of the kind of resources page looks like. One thing I'll also just draw your attention to is the success stories. I will say these are outdated, but nonetheless helpful and inspiring. And I'm really excited to update this with the success stories that we heard on Saturday. So, but it's still like really inspiring. And if your committee is looking for a little inspiration, definitely check out these success stories. So 2 final things. There's a lot on this website, but I'm trying to get to the key things that I think are relevant. One thing that is really exciting to me is the communications toolkit that we co-created over the summer with a cohort of your fellow energy committee members. I think I saw some people on this call, Sam Lash from Williston, some others. I don't know if Steve Isham's here from St. J, but a lot of people were involved in co-creating this toolkit. So I will let John give you a little bit more about what's in this toolkit.
Thank you, Becca. And I don't want to spend too much time because I think we want to get into breakouts and get into the conversation side of this workshop. But we are excited about this tool. One of those really valuable roles of town energy committees is that you know better than anyone else sort of how to interface with your community. What are the communications channels that are most effective to reach into all nooks and crannies of your community? And so the way we think about this toolkit is first to build that inventory. What are the different resources that you've got locally? Write that down in a document for a couple of reasons. One, because it establishes some institutional memory for your organization, and it's just a good exercise to do and then to refine over time. As you think about your work as an energy committee, that inventory of community communications resources, it's an asset for you. And it's also something that you don't want to have to recreate every time you're deploying a communications effort in town. And you know, it's a good place. Like, let's say there's a school newsletter that goes out, and let's say that newsletter goes out on Wednesdays, and let's say there's a person at the front desk of the school and you need to email that person on Monday to get into that newsletter, and it needs to be 2 paragraphs long. You are so much more effective if you have that conversation once with that person at the school. You write it down in a way that it is shared and documented such that the next time you want to get into that school newsletter, you just go back to your document and you say, oh, here's what we need to do. What you don't then have to do is call that person again and figure it out. So just that's the first task here, is really building that inventory. And then we've got a template and an example of how to actually build a plan. Let's say you are going to host an EV drive event and you want to spread the word. This is a template for figuring out how best to spread that word, how best to engage partners, and it sort of includes a calendar for you to build that plan and then implement that plan. And then finally, at the bottom here, you'll see some guides for the different ways to communicate. So like Front Porch Forum, contact lists and bulk emails. Your most important asset as an energy committee is your email list and phone list of people in your community. How do you engage that list? Do you have a website? Do you do letters to the editor? So these guides are little quick one-pagers that just help remind you of what are some of the effective ways to use these various tools. So, you know, we're going to have an in-depth workshop about this early in the new year, and really, but in the meantime, would encourage people to start using this. We're really excited about it, and we want to learn as we go. It was really nice to have a cohort who helped us build this, but frankly, it's never finished. We really want to constantly refine and improve this as people use this in their work. So please do not hesitate to share feedback as you put this into practice.
Thanks, John. That was a great overview. I guess the only other thing that I'll mention is, and I don't know, can you see over here in my screen? I can see you all, but I don't know if you can see that. Okay. The last thing is, if you haven't signed up to join our newsletter, I really recommend you do that. That's kind of the most frequent way that we communicate with you. We send our monthly e-newsletter out about 1 to 2 times a month with a lot of different climate action opportunities, including, you know, upcoming events or project and funding opportunities, news related resources. So definitely sign up if you haven't. I'm assuming a lot of you already signed up, but also if you want to look at any kind of past newsletters that have been sent out, we have an archive here, so you can always check those out as well if you want to refer back to them. And yeah, I mean, there's a lot here. So I recommend, if you have time at some point, you know, go through, see what other resources there are that we didn't cover today. And this is really a resource for all energy committees. So if there's any way that we can make it, you know, more helpful for your work, definitely let me know. But with that, I think I'll stop sharing my screen and I'll turn it over to Sarah to introduce the next part of our session.
Great. I also want to note that I saw Anne's question in the chat, which is such a good question about towns that have Australian ballot and how to get the word out to educate the public about something that you're going to have on that ballot. That is exactly the sort of thing I hope you'll bring up in the small groups. And if for some reason it doesn't come up in the small group, Anne, be in touch with Becca. Part of what we really want to do, particularly going into the new year with VECAN, is help all of you raise those kinds of questions with one another so that you can all be learning together. That's the whole point of VECAN.
Sarah, I was going to share one thought.
Oh yeah, go for it. Sorry.
On the resource front, we did a great job of highlighting resources. But one thing we didn't mention, you know, there's the VECAN newsletter, and sign up for that. That's number one most important thing. But there's also a VECAN membership listserv. And here's the difference between the listserv and the newsletter. Newsletter is really one-way communications from Becca and the team. And of course, you can get stuff added to that newsletter by communicating with Becca. But the power of the listserv is that you can actually just email everyone else who's on that listserv. And I like, as an example, Ann Lawless raised that question around how do you get in your town report? What is your strategy around town meeting day? I think as we think about that listserv, that's the kind of question we would love to see people just pose out to the group. And then you can, and people can answer via the group, because we're building that collective knowledge and connectivity. And there doesn't always have to be sort of the conduit of like a workshop like this or something like that. So that's just a little plug for that listserv, as I think people often have too high of a threshold in terms of when they might email that listserv. They're a little reticent about sending something that's going to go to a group. But honestly, I feel like let's get it using. Let's exercise it. Let's put it to work in terms of growing our connectivity. So that's my little pitch.
So we are going to get into the part of today where we all get to actually compare notes with one another, which I think is going to be really fun and the sort of thing that we would normally be doing at a VECAN conference, but we can't do so easily because we're all not together in the same space. So what we've done is we've picked 5 topics that from our, and by our, I mean John, Becca, and I, our interactions with energy committees over the last months or so. These are topics that seem to keep coming up. So we think that you'll have a lot to say about them and compare notes on. I'm going to pop the topics in the chat and just explain what I mean by them, because when we get to the point of breaking out into groups, you'll get to choose which of these groups you want to go and join. So the first is about finding and retaining volunteers. We're hearing that a lot of groups are really struggling with that right now. We've got Molly Smith from Hartford has volunteered to be the very light host to keep everybody on track in that room. And I know she's been thinking a lot about this recently. The second group is going to be on equity and inclusion. This is something I know a lot of us are wrestling with. If we want to make progress toward our energy and climate goals as a state, we have to do that in a way that encourages a just transition that's equitable and that brings everyone along. And that needs to happen at the state level, the regional level, but it also needs to be baked into how we do our energy committee work. So that session is going to be an opportunity to share thoughts and challenges and questions and successes that we're having trying to do better around equity and inclusion in our energy committee work. The third group is around, and by the way, my colleague Anna Gunther is going to be your quote host, just to keep everybody on track in that session. She is part of the equity and inclusion group at my organization and works with energy committees around this as well. Third group is partnerships, and by that we mean partnerships with other people in your community. I'm going back to my notes here. We were thinking things like schools, businesses, faith community, other local groups, landlords, just how to build relationships and leverage those relationships in your work within your community. So Brad Long from Efficiency Vermont is going to be the host for that. Brad works with a lot of energy committees to form relationships like that, so has thoughts on that as well. The fourth group is going to be about outreach and communications. So any of you who got really excited about that communications toolkit and have thoughts on what is and isn't working with how you do outreach, that's a good place to go and compare notes. And then the fifth conversation will be about engaging municipal leaders, working with your select board, getting things on the warrant for a town meeting or Australian ballot, those sorts of conversations. We all know that working with our town leaders can be really powerful and sometimes also really fraught. So we can compare notes on that. You should see an option to join any of the rooms that you wish to join. So go ahead and click join, and your host will meet you there.